Good afternoon. I'm Carolyn Hotchkiss. I'm the Dean of Faculty at Babson College, and I'm delighted to bring another video in our series of Babson videos. This afternoon, I'm pleased to welcome Andrew Zimmern, the James Beard Award-winning chef, raconteur, and man about globe, who hosts several television programs on the Travel Channel and the Food Network. I also have Rachel Greenberger, who's the director of our Food Soul project here at Babson College as part of the Lewis Institute. And I have Fred Opie, who is a professor of African American history and foodways here at Babson College. And we're just going to chat a little bit about why Andrew is here, because it's not the most obvious relationship that we would have. But I think you'll see very quickly that there's some very good reasons for Andrew to be with us today. So let me just start by asking a question that will hopefully tee up a conversation between Andrew and Fred. You seem to me to travel in two food worlds. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, you visit some very lovely restaurants with some absolutely wonderful chefs. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, you visit some very remote villages with no restaurants and some absolutely wonderful chefs. Mm-hmm. So what is it that ties this whole experience together, and what's the sensibility that you're engaging in when you bring these two pieces of your world together?
The insatiable curiosity that I have, that I think is shared by most people, sometimes buried underneath a lot of other stuff, but I think it's all there. I'm interested in learning everything that I can about another culture. The way that I prefer to do that is through food. I found that to be the thing I understand the most. So when I learn how a community, how a culture, how a people eat in one corner of the world, whether it's, high-end, glitzy tablecloth world of soigné Parisian society in 2009, or whether it's spending a week with the Himba in Namibia, to me it's the exact same thing. I'm there to do the exact same thing. The reason that I do it is twofold. One is extremely selfish. I like the version of myself when I travel. I'm challenged in a way that I'm not at home. I get out of my comfort zone. I try new things. I learn new things. I take stuff back. I'm more teachable. I'm more exposed. And the person that comes back to my house at the end of all these trips is a better person than when he left. So it's selfish. By the same token, I believe that in that personal journey for me, in that learning, not only of the culture, but a way to make myself better, I can make my community better. So if I can tell those stories and shine a little light for other people, and they can relate to an element, just one little thing in each of my shows. I make an entertainment program, but I try to shoot it through with an element of seriousness, because I want our world in a day and age where it's getting flatter and flatter and flatter. I think it's important that we have conversations about the things that we have in common, like our love for food, as opposed to all the differences that keep defining ourselves on the nightly news. And I think other people, sometimes they don't even know that they need that, and I think it's, in a sense, my job to tell them we need this, that sort of pay attention exclamation point. So I use stories from the fringe. The bizarre foods concept was the best way that I knew to get somebody's attention. I don't want to if I do another story about roast chicken, people are just going to change the channel to another network that has a roast chicken story. But if I'm sitting with some tribal people in Samoa on an uninhabited island eating roasted bats and pulling ginger root out of the ground and grating them together and pouring the juice over it as the only seasoning, I think they may stick around and watch.
Fred,
sound familiar?
Andrew, I've been watching your show, and it's probably the reason why I tuned in on your show is because out of all the programming going on in the food world, I found it the most engaging. As an historian, certainly I'm a foodie, but my food is very much engaged in kind of intellectual pursuits, but not highbrow stuff, but just what's going on. I wondered, because of what we do here at Babson and entrepreneurship, you've been to many different continents, you see many different people. Is there something that's a characteristic of entrepreneurs that carries across those different continents?
Sure.
That you could talk about.
Sure. The fascinating thing for me, and please don't pigeonhole yourself. We were just enjoying each other's company at lunch on some of these same issues, and I really think regardless of what silo you're in. I'm in the entertainment business. You have to use some entertainment when you're teaching students, otherwise, right, you have to engage them. You got to engage them. I'm the exact opposite. I'm trying to put 10% of what you love into my show. I think we're the same kind of person on the inside. When I travel around the world, I learned about the Babson definition of entrepreneurship by reading books and magazine articles and doing research in the run up to coming out here. But what I found most fascinating on my first phone call with the group here, when we started to explore the ideas of maybe making this happen, was how so much of what I experience out in the world mimics exactly what's going on here. Babson stands for words, action tank. Out in the real world, people do act their way into right thinking. They don't think their way into right acting. It's a common theme when you're with tribal peoples. Nothing is done unintentionally. Nothing is done to impress someone else. The social conventions, other than peacocking if you need another wife or you're trying to get some more animals for your herd, in a pastoral society, you will then use certain conventions that are quite cute to watch. They're very obvious to a Westerner what they are as one tries to get another wife or another man's herd. But getting into action, using social change as an impetus to educate, to create new economic models, to sustain the furtherance of a community, survive an event, how these very simple communities change and morph with the times is so important to study from a food standpoint and from the entrepreneurship standpoint, because there's not a lot of clutter around. You can see it for what it is. I spent a lot of time with some African tribal peoples, and one of them, the Juntoisi in Botswana, they don't have personal possessions. Everything is community driven. And watching how they share implements and what they choose to make or not make, what they choose to trade for, how they choose to feed themselves, the opportunity that is seized. Here are people that have a poison on their arrows that can drop an elephant in 15 paces. Wow. Drop an elephant. Wow. But they won't kill anything bigger than a 45-pound animal, even though everything is all around them, for a whole variety of reasons, mostly because they don't want to take more food than they could eat in a single day. Now, just taking that idea, just that simple idea of how we eat and respect food, is a staggering phenomenon. They could follow, they could hunt all over for honey and bees, but they don't. Only when a honeybird comes and they follow it to the hive will they actually go pursue it, because they consider it a gift, which is interesting considering how few flowers are in the desert. These are tiny little ideas and stories, but it speaks to how we take pleasure in food, the difference between foods born of necessity and the lotus eating that we do, and I mean that in the mythological sense with food. It's an amazing world out there that we can learn so much from. Then the flip side of that is what the community like Babson can do out there in the world, harnessing the energy here and applying it to the food pathways, the stuff that Rachel and Project Soul are so heavily invested in. When I see an oyster farm in Namibia off the coast, and none of the Namibians eat oysters. The Northern Europeans and Chinese who are created these floating cities out there to harvest mussels and oysters and clams, never set foot on Namibian soil, and they have a deal with the government that allows them to put very little into that system. The richest seawater in the world in terms of amazing high-quality shellfish in staggering numbers, because it's essentially untouched, is down in that part of Africa where those cold Antarctic currents come up. So why in a country like Namibia, where they could really use some resources, a well-managed fishery system and some quality exports, even to help feed the rest of Africa, forget about sending out to the rest of the world, the implications for that, if we could help Namibians help themselves, would be such a gift to that part of the world. And instead of arguing about whether or not an electric dam is going to cause disturbance to the Himba, we might do well to ask the Himba if they want electricity and turn our attention to the things that we know they're asking for, which is food and economic freedom. And I think when you start to take the ideas that we talk about here at Babson and you start to apply them into the real politic of our food world, not just in Africa, but right here at home, look at the shrimpers and the baymen, look at the farmers, look at the aquaculture systems here, look at the subsidized world in the big ag industry that we have. Look at what's happening to our sustainable models, not just environmental, but economic and cultural, in terms of what needs to be preserved so that we can look at it and learn from it before it's gone. I think the opportunity to take the action tanks here and the incredible passion and firepower that the student body has here and direct them towards some of those projects is, I think, such an amazing opportunity. I'm so excited about that because I think that these kind of stories will energize some of them as well. And our sitting here today is, throw a stone into a pond will have a ripple effect that I hope is felt for decades to come. It certainly impresses me. I'm changed, and I've only been here for a couple hours.
We put Kool-Aid in your coffee cup.
No, there's a lot of smart. I'm not used to being the least informed person in a room. It hurts. But I really do think, all kidding aside, that there are so many implications for what's being done here because we name it things in the classroom and we have to formalize it, and that's how we're measured, and we set up curriculum about it. We have a lot of fancy words about it. But the great thing about Babson is that there is a real life understanding about making something actionable and getting a tangible result, and not just having it be something that we all talk about, And to me, that's what's needed in this world, and I see it out there because that's the way the rest of the world thinks, especially that tribal world, especially that tribal world. So,
in your travels, are you finding that we often think that we'll come from Babson and we'll show you how to do things and we'll make things happen for you. I'm assuming that this is very much a two-way street.
Of course.
That really one of the things your travels show, and I think about this when I think about your writing, is that the very, very rich traditions that exist around the world and in this country as well have so much to show us today.
I think it's what's interesting. I know as an historian, the number of times that I see, you look at the period of like segregation in the United States, the number of African American entrepreneurs who prospered in the midst of that kind of repression. And then you look at some of the kind of the economic hurdles that people that you interview and meet on your show, that they go over and just doing extremely successful without having, the kind of the help and nurturing that others get. To me, is always amazing how, despite resistance, a true entrepreneur will always rise to the top.
Did you, I don't know if you saw my Cambodia show, but we went to the town of Scone in Cambodia. Scone is famous for one thing. It's the place the two main highways cross that isn't located in a big city. And because of that, the rest stops went there. Just like in many places in rural parts of America, the crossroads. Tarantulas. The greatest concentration of edible tarantulas in the world are there. Tarantulas taste like crab. They're delicious, but you have to have them fresh. Most places you can't find them fresh. When we went there, the easy story would have been, look at all the people eating spiders. Isn't that gross? But that's not what our show is about. Our show is about stories and people. So we found a group of women who had lost their husbands in the political situation. They were so unstable for so long. So there are 5 or 6 single moms, all with kids, who banded together. They scraped together whatever meager savings they could. They had to take care of their children, and they hired a guy to go bring them bags of these tarantulas. And then they would take them, they would cook them fresh, and they would take them to the bus stops and sell them. Well, now they have 20 or 30 people working for them in what's basically a fast food distribution center.
Wow.
And to be in this woman's home, she actually lives, her home is about as big as this room, and it's all poured cement. She's a rich lady by Scone standards. And all she does now is lift up other single moms behind her. That's the only people that she is interested in having work for her.
Wow.
Now that story in America, she'd be on the cover of People magazine.
Yeah. Right.
That to me is what it's all about. That was such a stirring moment. Not only and to learn it through pursuit of food. If I stopped at the bus station and ate the first tarantula I would find, I would learn nothing. But you and I both know you go to the last stop on the subway and it'll be amazed what you find. You get to the furthest place out and work your way back. You don't go to the easy access point. And that to me is what's thrilling. And if that isn't a great entrepreneurial story, and we bump into them all the time. Survival is a very powerful motivator.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And the spiders were pretty good too. You bring your kids. We'll get them.
Rachel, I think this is a good connector point to
Absolutely.
Certainly, first of all, welcome Andrew to being part of the Food Soul Project.
Absolutely.
But tell us...
My other boss.
That's right. Your real boss is over on that side of the table.
I'm so activated right now that I don't even know if I can sit here for the rest of this interview. I want to go do something. No, we're so thrilled because there's such an alignment of mindset. And Fred's blog is called Food as a Lens. And I keep thinking of that phrase as it's such an intuitive and primal entry point into tackling all sorts of issues, social justice, economics, environmental, all sorts of things. And I just feel like I worked in the travel industry for a number of years before I came to Babson and started Food Soul, and I feel like that experience being in all different parts of the world taught me that it's not this one way, America knows best, and we have, clearly, but we don't have the models. And what's interesting about food is looking at it in an aggregate sense. The true industrialization of food is less than a century old. And for thousands upon thousands of years, we have fed ourselves and oriented to food in a different way. This is not irreversible. Some of these tendencies are not irreversible. And what Food Soul tries to do is say, what is your as a human being food values? What is your food story? Let's get you in touch with your relationship to food, and then begin to find the entrepreneurial opportunity or the action that you want to take. So it's not looking at it from a pedantic point of view of let me tell you the best version of the ship that's going down that you've ever heard, and then you're going to be paralyzed and think, well, what can I do about it? And so what's so exciting and activating to Food Soul about Andrew and his stories is the energy of, I can give you a clear example. I can use terms and I can describe a situation that you can relate to, that you can access. And when you're in an environment like Babson with all this entrepreneurial energy, when you make the challenge bite-sized, people can start to take an action and scale the change.
And you want to know about what those last bottles of water in the desert are. I mean, that's the. I'm not arguing, and I don't think you are either, that we need to go back to the era of the horse and buggy. Although there's probably someone out there who make a very good case for it. But we don't want to give up the combustion engine.
Right.
We just need to figure out a better way to use it. And the American way, and this is a uniquely American concept, is to blow it up bigger, better, faster, stronger, cheaper, and hold it that way. It's that pursuit that has kind of destroyed our food system. And we can look around the world to other places that have solved that problem and learn so much from it. And once we refocus, to your point, that ingenuity, that spirit of entrepreneurship, I tell people all the time that everyone is doom and gloomer and they think that I must be an incredibly depressive person. Quite the opposite. I mean, our energy problems in this country is good. There's the next, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Isaac Newton is sitting out there somewhere, maybe on this campus right now,
in about an hour,
and they're the ones who are going to change the world. And I met with a group of young people, nicknamed Generation O, Generation Organics, at a conference in Wisconsin this summer, and I'd never felt better about my world than I did after seeing the energy and the passion that these kids had, who were trying to make their own web show by buying an old bus and kind of like Ken Kesey, piling other students on them. They're all farm kids. Every single one of them is grown up on a farm, and what they want to do is go around to all the big city universities all around the country where most of the kids are not farm-raised and teach them about what's going on in their world. And I sent a text to Lainey Colos, the young girl who was my guide. That's how I got plugged into these kids. She was the one who was supposed to shepherd around the celebrity that was showing up to give a talk. And I told her, thanks to you and your energy you gave me, I'm here at Babson today. It's unbelievable how if you just speak your mind. She turned to me at one point and just spoke her mind, and I found her the most fascinating person I've met all year long. And it's such a great opportunity these days. There is a lot of problems. There are so many problems in our world. But the opportunity that's there is so tremendous. I'll leave you with a very interesting thought. You're talking about the both ways sort of aspect of things. I'm a left-wing Lindsay liberal from New York City. My mom, bred those statistics. The Black Panthers were in our house. My mother was raising money for, all of those wonderful sort of Tom Wolfe books. I lived that lifestyle in the 60s growing up in New York. And the amazing thing for me is how hard it is for me to change, because as a human being, it's so difficult. I mean, you've got to come into a situation of such misery to really change something about you, or be thrown into a situation where you're forced to use a different way of thinking or doing, and you realize it works. Because I'm lazy. I like the way I do things. So my wife and I have been together for a long time, and she's very, very green, much greener than I am. She tried to get me to just be a little more respectful and recycle the cans, but what about the really gross ones with the mayonnaise? Do I have to wash those out too? And she's like, it's all or nothing, all or nothing, all of that. And I'm like, but it doesn't really matter. It's one jar. And she's like, it matters to that, whatever that smell, that's one more, that's one less. And she really taught me those values, but I couldn't quite change fully. And she would get upset with me, and she'd say, look, I always put my drink on a coaster. You do half the time. Why can't you just do it all the way? And I would make up this game where I'm like, I'm an artist, I'm a creative. And she's like, it's an excuse, it's an excuse, it's an excuse. And I guess I knew it intellectually, but it wasn't in my DNA yet. And I was in Africa with a tribe, and we went to lay some rope traps to get some birds to feed the community. And I said, where's the rope? And they said, oh, we're going to make it. So we walk, but you don't carry it with you. You don't make it and then walk it to the hunting grounds. Why would you? You want to be free and easy and take in the whole world. You collect the plants along the way, and then everyone sits down and weaves this between their toes for like 2 or 3 hours. And we make 10 sets of rope, each one about 8 feet long, and we lay our traps. And then we go back and we sleep. We come back the next day, and there's 10 or 12, hawkbills just sitting there, limp, snapped. Neck snapped, and they're waiting for us, and we go to get them. And I want to be helpful, because the way you prove yourself in a tribal situation is to be helpful. You can build fire, you can collect food, you're worthy, right? And I take out my pocket knife and I go to cut the rope, and the whole group of tribespeople, the Juntoisie, are just like, there's this just. The air was just sucked out of the desert, and I look around like, what? And they're looking at me and my translator, and they speak in clicks and whistles, so I have no idea what they're saying. It's like, why are you cutting the rope? Put the knife away. They're scared you're going to cut the rope. And I'm like, well, of course I'm going to cut the rope, because I go to get a Christmas tree, and I put twine around it. I cut it away. I throw it in the garden before I come in the house, because there's rope in every junk drawer in our house. And they're like, we made that rope. We use that rope for years. Until that rope falls apart. And then it goes back into the soil and new things grow from it. Like, we live this.
Yes.
You mustn't cut the rope. I was so ashamed, and I was so embarrassed that I was that ugly version of myself that came from home that would cut the rope. I'm no longer, since that exact moment, I'm no longer the guy that cuts the rope anywhere. That's a very powerful thing. That's the power of exposing yourself to these ideas. So not only is the population here at Babson, I think, going to be able to do so much for so many, but I think we're going to learn the lessons from out on the road, whether it's from a half hour away or whether it's from 5,000 miles away, and be able to bring that back into the community here at the school.
Great.
And I think that's what's great about our world.
Well, welcome to Babson.
Thank you.
I can hardly wait to turn our students loose on you later this afternoon.
Is that going to hurt?
Not much.
Okay.
So
All right.
I think it'll all be good.
All right.
But we're delighted to have you with us, and thanks for coming.
I'm thrilled.